Deep in Africa, an entire city was erased from history. But its secrets never disappeared.
Thousands once lived here. Then one day, they vanished without leaving a single answer.
Explorers thought they found ordinary stones, until they uncovered a lost city. What if history's greatest missing chapter was hidden deep inside Africa?
Have you ever wondered, what if somewhere deep inside Africa, hidden away from the modern world, there is a city that was never supposed to be found? A city built by people whose names were erased from history. A city that survived for hundreds of years, but the people who created it disappeared without leaving a clear explanation. What would you do if you were the first person to enter a forgotten place where nobody had walked for centuries? Would you search for answers? Or would you turn back after discovering something that was never meant to be seen? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, because today's mystery is one of Africa's most fascinating secrets. Welcome back to Africa Uncovered. Before we begin this unbelievable journey into the forgotten corners of Africa, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on notifications. Because here, we uncover the hidden stories, ancient mysteries, and forgotten civilizations that the world still cannot fully explain. Now, let us travel into a mystery that begins with a simple question. Who built a city that history forgot? Deep in the African wilderness, where nature stretches for miles and modern civilization feels like another world, explorers discovered something that changed everything. At first, they thought they had found ordinary stones, pieces of an old structure, maybe just the remains of a forgotten settlement. But as they moved closer, they realized they were looking at something impossible. The stones were arranged perfectly. The walls were massive. The design showed planning and intelligence. This was not random. This was not a simple village. This was the remains of a lost city. A city that once had life. A city where people woke up every morning. A city where families created memories. A city where dreams were built. But now, there was nobody left. Only silence. Only ancient walls. Only questions. The biggest mystery was not how old the city was. The biggest mystery was, where did everyone disappear? For generations, this place remained hidden from the outside world. The jungle grew around it. The earth covered its secrets. Time tried to erase every trace that this civilization ever existed. But the stones remembered. Every wall had a story. Every pathway carried memories. Every corner of this forgotten city was a message from people who lived long before us. Researchers began studying the ruins carefully, and what they discovered shocked them. The builders were not simple people. They had knowledge. They had skills. They understood construction. They created structures that showed organization and creativity. They were people with ambition. People who wanted to build something that would survive forever. But something happened. Something forced them to leave. Something caused an entire civilization to disappear. And that is where the mystery becomes even darker. Because when researchers searched for answers, they discovered something strange. There were no clear records explaining their final days. No message telling future generations what happened. No explanation for why such a powerful society suddenly vanished. It was as if the last chapter of their story had been taken away. Imagine living in this city hundreds of years ago. The streets are full of people. The sounds of conversations fill the air. Children are running through the pathways. Families are preparing food. Workers are building the future of their civilization. Nobody knows that one day, everything will become silent. Nobody knows that their homes will become ruins. Nobody knows that future generations will walk through their city asking one question: what happened here? And maybe the most emotional part of this mystery is this: these were not just buildings. These were people's lives. Behind every stone was a person, a mother, a father, a child, someone who had hopes, someone who had dreams, someone who believed their home would always exist. But time changes everything. The strongest cities can fall. The greatest civilizations can disappear. And sometimes, the world forgets the very people who created something extraordinary. But their story was not completely lost, because centuries later, the forgotten city was finally speaking again. And the secrets hidden inside those ancient walls were about to reveal a mystery that nobody expected. Because the discovery was only the beginning. The real question was still waiting. Why did an entire civilization disappear without a trace? And the answer would take explorers deeper into one of Africa's greatest unsolved mysteries. The deeper researchers went into the ruins, the more they realized one thing. This was not just an abandoned place. This was a forgotten chapter of human history. A chapter that had been buried for centuries. A chapter that was waiting for someone to finally listen. Because every ancient wall had something to say. Every stone had a memory. And every discovery created a new question. Who were the people who built this incredible city? How did they create such a complex settlement? And why did they leave behind everything they had built? These questions became the greatest mystery surrounding this lost African city. But what researchers discovered next made the mystery even more unbelievable. Welcome back to Africa Uncovered. If you are enjoying this journey into Africa's hidden past, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and share this story with someone who loves mysteries. And before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you discovered an ancient city hidden for hundreds of years, a place where an unknown civilization once lived, would you enter those ruins looking for answers? Or would you be afraid of what you might discover? Tell us your answer in the comments below. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries of history are not hidden because they are impossible to find. They are hidden because nobody has asked the right questions. When researchers began exploring deeper into the city, they noticed something unusual. The builders had not created random structures. Everything had a purpose. The walls were carefully designed. The spaces between buildings showed planning. The entire city appeared to have been created by people who understood how a society should function. This was not a place built by accident. This was a place built with vision. Someone had looked at empty land and imagined something bigger. They imagined homes. They imagined communities. They imagined a future. And they turned that imagination into reality. But the mystery was, how did they achieve so much? Many centuries ago, without the technology that exists today, these people created structures that still make experts wonder. They moved heavy stones. They designed complex buildings. They created a place that could survive the test of time. But while the buildings gave researchers clues about their abilities, they revealed very little about their identity. The people who created this city left behind their work, but they left behind almost no explanation. It was like finding a book with thousands of pages, but someone had removed the most important chapters. As scientists continued studying the ruins, they discovered signs that this city was once full of life. There were areas where people may have gathered, places where communities may have celebrated important moments, locations where families may have spent generations together. And this changed the way people looked at the ruins, because this was not just history. This was humanity. These were real people. They had worries, They had dreams. They had families. They woke up every morning believing their world would continue forever, just like we do today. But something changed. Something happened that slowly turned a living city into an empty memory. Theories began to appear. Some researchers believed environmental changes may have affected the civilization. Maybe the land could no longer support the population. Maybe resources became harder to find. Maybe people were forced to search for a new place to survive. Others believed there could have been conflicts. A powerful society could still face dangers. Even the strongest civilizations in history have fallen. But the truth remained hidden. Because no single explanation could answer every question, and that made the mystery even stronger. But then, researchers noticed something that created even more curiosity. The city was not completely abandoned in a chaotic way. There were signs that people may have left gradually. They did not simply disappear in one night. They did not destroy everything before leaving. They walked away. But why? Why would anyone leave behind a place they spent generations building? Imagine leaving your home, leaving the place where your parents were born, leaving the streets where your children played, leaving behind everything your ancestors created. What could make someone make that decision? What could be powerful enough to make an entire community walk away? That question remained unanswered. And then came another shocking discovery. The people who lived there were connected to something much bigger than just a single city. Their story was connected to trade, culture, knowledge, and a forgotten part of Africa's history that many people never learned about. The world often remembers famous civilizations from other parts of the world, but many African civilizations carried incredible stories that remained hidden. Stories of innovation, stories of survival, stories of people who built amazing things long before modern history recorded their achievements. And this lost city was one of those stories. A reminder that Africa's past was not empty. It was filled with powerful civilizations, brilliant minds, and people whose achievements deserved to be remembered. But the biggest mystery was still waiting. Because discovering how the city was built was only half the story. The real mystery was about the people themselves. Where did they go? Did they survive somewhere else? Did they create a new home? Or did something happen that completely erased them from history? The answers were hidden somewhere, waiting beneath the forgotten stones. And when researchers began following the next clues, they discovered something that would make this mystery even more shocking. Because the disappearance of this civilization was not just a historical event. It was a human tragedy. A story about people who lost the world they built. A story about a civilization that disappeared, but never truly left. The search for the lost people was about to begin. The ruins were silent, but the silence was hiding a story. A story about thousands of people who once walked through these ancient pathways. A story about families who built their lives around these walls. A story about a civilization that achieved greatness, only to disappear into the shadows of history. And perhaps the most frightening part of this mystery was not that the city was abandoned. It was that nobody knew the exact reason why. Because when a city falls, there is usually evidence. There are signs of destruction. There are stories of battles. There are records of what happened. But here, there was something different. There was a strange emptiness, a silence that created more questions than answers. Welcome back to Africa Uncovered. If you are enjoying this mysterious journey, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on notifications. Because here, we uncover the forgotten stories hidden beneath Africa's ancient lands. And before we continue today's mystery, I want to ask you something. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and discover that your entire city has been abandoned. The homes are still standing, the roads are still there, but every person has disappeared. What would be the first thing you would search for? The reason they left? The people who vanished? Or the secret they left behind? Share your answer in the comments below. Because this mystery is not only about an ancient city, it is about human life, survival, and the stories that time tries to erase. As researchers continued their investigation, they started looking beyond the walls. They searched the surrounding lands. They studied the environment. They examined every clue that could explain the disappearance of the people who once lived there. And slowly, a different picture began to appear. This was not a story about a weak civilization. This was a story about a civilization that had reached a level of development that many people never expected. These people had built communities. They had created systems. They had adapted to their environment. They had survived for generations. So the question became even harder. If they were so successful, why would they leave? One possibility was nature itself. The land that once supported them may have started changing. Weather patterns can transform the future of entire civilizations. A place that once provided enough resources can slowly become difficult to survive in. Water sources can disappear. Food can become harder to find. The environment that once helped a civilization grow can eventually become the reason it must leave. Imagine watching the place your ancestors built slowly changing. Imagine seeing familiar lands becoming harder to live in. Imagine having to make a decision no family wants to make. Leave everything behind, or risk losing everything. But there were other possibilities too. Some researchers believe that human conflicts may have played a role. History has shown us that even powerful civilizations can face challenges from within and outside. Disagreements can grow. Resources can become valuable. Power can create struggles. And sometimes, the very things that make a civilization powerful can also become the reason it falls. But even this theory could not answer every question, because there was no clear evidence of a final battle, no great destruction, no moment where the city suddenly ended. Instead, the city seemed to slowly become quiet. One family left, then another, until one day, the voices were gone. But the most emotional part of this mystery is thinking about the final moments of the people who lived there. Imagine a mother looking at the home where her children were born. Imagine a father touching the walls he helped build. Imagine an elderly person saying goodbye to the place where they spent their entire life. They did not know that future generations would call their home a mystery. They did not know that hundreds of years later, strangers would walk through their streets searching for answers. They were simply people trying to survive. People who loved. People who hoped. People who wanted a better future. Just like every generation before and after them. As researchers continued studying the ruins, they discovered something powerful. The city was not only a place of stone, it was a place of memories. A place where human dreams became reality. Because every civilization leaves behind more than buildings. It leaves behind emotions. It leaves behind stories. It leaves behind proof that people were here, that they mattered, that their lives had meaning. And maybe that is why lost cities continue to fascinate us. because they remind us of something we often forget. Every person who lived before us had a story. Every forgotten name belonged to someone. Every ancient ruin was once someone's home. But as the investigation continued, researchers found another mystery. The disappearance was not the only strange thing about this civilization. There were signs that these people may have had connections far beyond their own land. Evidence suggested they were part of a much larger world. They were not isolated. They were connected. They exchanged ideas. They shared knowledge. They were part of a history that was much bigger than anyone imagined. And suddenly, the mystery changed. The question was no longer only, why did they disappear? The question became, how much of their story has the world forgotten? For centuries, many stories from Africa remained hidden. Not because they were unimportant, but because history is often written by those who leave records behind. And when a civilization disappears without written explanations, the world can forget how powerful and meaningful it truly was. But these ruins were bringing their story back. The stones were speaking again. The forgotten people were being remembered again. However, one final mystery remained. Researchers still needed to understand what happened after the people left. Did they move somewhere else? Did they create a new civilization? Did their descendants continue their story? Or did they disappear completely? The answer was hidden somewhere in the past, waiting to be uncovered. And the next discoveries would reveal clues that would make this mystery even more fascinating. Because deep inside the forgotten remains of this ancient city, something was waiting. Something that would change the way people viewed this lost civilization forever. The truth was closer than anyone expected, but the final secret was still hidden beneath the stones. For centuries, the lost city remained silent. The stones stood under the African sky, holding memories of a civilization that had disappeared. But every mystery has a moment when the past begins to speak again. And for this forgotten city, that moment had arrived. Because as researchers continued exploring deeper into the ruins, they started discovering clues that revealed something incredible. The people who built this place were not ordinary builders. They were not simply creating shelters. They were creating a legacy. A message that would survive long after they were gone. Welcome back to Africa Uncovered. If you believe forgotten stories like this deserve to be remembered, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and share this story with someone who loves mysteries. And before we continue, I have a question for you. If ancient people left behind a message for the future, a message hidden inside their buildings, would you want to discover it? Or do you think some secrets from the past are better left hidden? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Because today, we are getting closer to the secret that this lost city has protected for hundreds of years. As researchers examined the ruins more carefully, they began noticing details that had been overlooked before. The placement of the stones, the design of the structures, the way different parts of the city connected with each other. Everything seemed intentional. Nothing was random. The builders had a vision. They understood their surroundings. They understood how to create a place where people could live, work, and survive. And this discovery changed everything. Because the lost city was no longer just an archaeological mystery. It became evidence of a forgotten human achievement. A reminder that thousands of years ago, people were already creating incredible things. They were solving problems. They were building communities. They were shaping the future. But then, researchers discovered something even more fascinating. The city appeared to have been connected to a much larger world. The people who lived there were not isolated from everyone else. They exchanged goods. They shared ideas. They were part of networks that connected different regions. This meant something important. This civilization was not forgotten because it was insignificant. It was forgotten because time had hidden its story. And there is a huge difference. A forgotten story does not mean an unimportant story. Imagine the city during its greatest days. The sun rises over the ancient walls. People begin their daily work. Markets become alive. Families gather together. Travelers arrive from distant lands. The sound of conversations fills the streets. Children grow up learning the traditions of their ancestors. For the people living there, this was not a mystery. This was home. They did not see themselves as part of an ancient civilization. They were simply people living their lives. They were creating memories. They were building a future. They had no idea that one day, their entire world would become a question mark for future generations. But then came the moment that changed everything. The city began to lose its people. Slowly, quietly, without a clear explanation. The same streets that once carried thousands of footsteps became empty. The same homes that once protected families became abandoned. The same walls that once represented strength became reminders of what was lost. And perhaps the most heartbreaking question is, did the people know they were leaving forever? Or did they believe they would return? Did they close their doors, thinking they would open them again someday? Did they leave belongings behind because they expected to come back? Or did they already know their journey was ending? These questions are what make this mystery so emotional. Because behind every ancient discovery, there are human emotions. There is hope. There is fear. There is loss. The people of this forgotten city were not characters from a legend. They were real. They had families. They had struggles. They had dreams. And somewhere in history, their voices became silent. But the ruins still carried clues. Researchers continued searching. They examined the remains. They studied the environment. They compared the evidence with other ancient civilizations. And slowly, they started understanding one important truth. The fall of this city was not simply the end of a place. It was the beginning of a forgotten journey. The people may have disappeared from the city, but their influence may have continued somewhere else. Their knowledge, their traditions, their stories, their bloodlines. Perhaps they were never truly gone. Perhaps they simply became part of another chapter of Africa's incredible history. And this is where the mystery becomes even more powerful. Because sometimes we imagine lost civilizations as something completely gone. But history is not always about disappearance. Sometimes history is about transformation. A people can move. A culture can change. A city can fall. But the human story continues. Yet one question remained unanswered. If these people left, where did they go? What happened to their descendants? And why did history almost forget them? Researchers knew the ruins were only showing part of the story. The biggest secret was not written on the walls. It was hidden in the connection between the past and the present. Somewhere, there was a missing piece, a final clue, a forgotten truth waiting to be discovered. Because the lost city was not just a place of ancient stones. It was a message from the past. A message telling the world, we were here. We built. We lived. We mattered. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not why the city disappeared. Perhaps the greatest mystery is why the world stopped listening to its story. But now, the forgotten voices were returning. The ancient walls were speaking again. And the final chapter of this incredible mystery was about to be revealed. Because in the deepest parts of this lost city, researchers would uncover the truth that would bring everything together. The mystery was almost solved, but the most emotional discovery was still waiting. For hundreds of years, the lost city remained forgotten. The voices of the people who built it disappeared into time. The streets became silent. The walls became covered by nature. And the world slowly moved on. But the past has a strange way of returning. Sometimes, the stories we think are gone forever are simply waiting for someone to discover them again. And this lost African city was one of those stories. Because beneath the ancient stones was not only a mystery, it was a reminder. A reminder that every civilization, no matter how forgotten, has a story worth telling. Welcome back to Africa Uncovered. If you have enjoyed this incredible journey through one of Africa's greatest mysteries, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Africa Uncovered, and turn on notifications. Because there are still thousands of forgotten stories hidden across Africa. Stories of powerful civilizations, brilliant minds, and people whose achievements deserve to be remembered. Before we reveal the final part of this mystery, I want to ask you one last question. After hearing this story, do you think this lost civilization truly disappeared? Or do you believe their story continued through the generations that came after them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Because sometimes, your opinion can be the beginning of another great mystery. As researchers continued studying the ruins, they realized something important. They were not just looking at abandoned buildings, they were looking at the remains of human dreams. Every stone represented effort. Every wall represented hope. Every structure represented a person who believed their work would matter. And maybe they were right, because centuries later, people from around the world were still standing in front of their creation, still asking questions, still trying to understand who they were, still searching for the truth. The mystery of the lost city teaches us something powerful. History is not only about famous kings. It is not only about great battles. It is not only about the names written in books. History is also about ordinary people. People who built homes. People who raised families. People who worked every day to create a better future. People whose names may have been forgotten, but whose lives were just as meaningful as anyone else's. Imagine one final moment in this ancient city. The sun is setting. The golden light touches the stone walls. A family stands outside their home. A child looks at the city around them. They see the streets. They see the buildings. They see the place where they were born. They do not know what the future holds. They do not know that one day, their home will become a mystery. They do not know that centuries later, strangers will walk through these same streets searching for answers. They simply know one thing. This is their home. This is where their story belongs. But then time moves forward. Generations pass. The city becomes quiet. The people move on. And slowly, the world forgets. But forgetting does not mean something had no value. A forgotten civilization can still inspire. A lost story can still teach. A silent city can still speak. And that is the true power of history. The mystery of this lost African city may never have every answer. There may always be questions. There may always be theories. There may always be secrets hidden beneath the ground. But perhaps that is what makes it so fascinating. Because mysteries remind us that we do not know everything. They remind us to stay curious. They remind us that the world is bigger than we imagine. And they remind us that there are still stories waiting to be uncovered. Africa is a land of incredible history, a land of ancient knowledge, a land where countless stories have been passed from one generation to another. But many of these stories remain hidden. Many voices are still waiting to be heard. And every discovery brings us closer to understanding the people who came before us, the people who built, the people who dreamed, the people who left behind a message written not with words, but with their actions. The lost city was never truly empty, because every time someone learns its story, the people who lived there return. Every time someone remembers them, their voices become stronger. Every time someone shares their history, they become part of the future again. And maybe that is the greatest lesson of all. Buildings can fall. Cities can disappear. Empires can end. But the stories of people, the dreams of people, the humanity of people can survive forever. So the next time you see an ancient ruin, do not only see old stones. See the hands that built them. See the families who lived there. See the dreams that once filled those streets. Because behind every forgotten place, there is a story. And behind every story, there are people who deserve to be remembered. This was another journey into the hidden mysteries of Africa. This was Africa Uncovered. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with others who love uncovering the secrets of the past. Because Africa's history is not only written in books. Sometimes, it is written beneath the earth. Sometimes, it is hidden inside ancient walls. And sometimes, it is waiting for someone like you to discover it. Thank you for watching. Until the next mystery, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep uncovering the stories that the world forgot. End.